Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to be dissecting someone else's code so that we as level designers can understand what might be going on in the level, even if we cannot see the level itself. Now this is a good thing to learn because as a level designer, sometimes you're looking at code, sometimes you're looking at the level, sometimes you're manipulating both, sometimes you're designing all of it. So you really have to figure out what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. So this example is in C#, and we're using MonoDevelop, and we're inside of Unity 4.3, just to make sure that everybody knows if there's some error that you might be getting, why you might not be getting it, or as long as you're in MonoDevelop, C#, Unity 4.3, everything should look, feel, and be the same. So this is an extremely simple intro level coding example. Okay, so if you already know about programming in C# and Unity, then this video is not for you. This is just the very basics of someone who does not know coding at all. So first up is variables, and it doesn't matter, all this stuff up here. Unity creates all that for you. The main thing is that variables are just names. So it doesn't really matter whether it's JavaScript, C#, C++, whatever type of code you're doing. If you're looking at someone's code, the variables are just names. They're just containers, like the word human. It's just a name that describes something, okay? So first up, you can see that we have booleans. Booleans are just true, false. That's all they are. True, false means boolean. Boolean means true, false. So you can see here that we have one boolean. In C#, you just write it as bool, B-O-O-L, and we're going to call it this variable name of zombie headshot, and we're going to set it to false. Okay, then we have another bool, zombie loot dropper. Set that to true. So how we could use this in code is we could say, okay, well, every time the zombie dies, was it a zombie headshot? Right? So if the bullet hits the head, then that would be set to true. And if true, then we check, is he a zombie loot dropper? If he is a loot dropper, true, then we're going to drop, 50 pieces of gold or, zombie teeth or whatever it is that you might be collecting in the game. But again, variables are just names, and this name of this variable, right, it's a boolean. The name is zombie headshot, and we're setting it to false. Okay. Up next, we have integers. Integers are just numbers without decimals. Okay, they could be positive or negative. So in C#, we do int for integer, and then we give it the variable name, so zombie health, and we set it to a value, equals 50. So the zombie health is 50. So if your bullet does 10 points of damage, you have to shoot him 5 times to kill him. Again, int zombie strength, we set him to 10. So this could be the bite strength. When he bites you, he takes, 10 points of damage or whatever, right? So those are integers, numbers without decimals, okay? Now we have floats. Floats are numbers with decimals. And again, this is every programming language, okay? You might be writing it differently. For example, the little f here, you don't really need that in other languages, but in this language we do. So floats, numbers with variables. We're going to type the word float. Then we're going to give the variable a name, zombie bite damage. So this particular zombie does 10 points of bite damage when he bites you. So maybe once we upgrade him, he'll do 10.5, and then he'll do 11, and then he'll do 11.5, and then he'll do 12. Maybe whatever it may be. So the fact that it's a float means we can add decimal numbers there. So again, zombie, let's do zombie conversion time in minutes. Maybe after he bites you, it takes 30 minutes to turn into a zombie, before you turn into a zombie, but maybe if you drink some potion, a +5 potion, it now goes to 35 minutes and 72 seconds or something. Alright, so up next we have strings. Strings are just text, okay? You'll know it's text if it has these little quotation marks around it, okay? So for example, we could do string, and what text could we possibly want? Well, maybe we want a zombie name, okay? And these names you can write however you want, uppercase, lowercase, whatever it may be. Some game engines prefer that you use lowercase numbers on the first letter, or sorry, lowercase letters on the first of the word. But you'll have to figure that out for whatever game engine you're using. As a rule, I typically just do lowercase all the time. So this word, right, is a string. We're going to call it zombie name, and inside quotation marks, we're going to call him Rob Zombie. Okay? So what if we want a whole bunch of names? Well, that's where something like a list or an array comes into play. Okay? So to do an array, you're going to have to do this here. It could be string, it could be int, it could be float, whatever array you want, or list, okay? So for example, I'm going to do zombie names, which are strings, and I want a bunch of them, so I can create an array by putting these two little brackets. So string bracket, it's going to be called zombie names, and then in the squiggly marks here, I'm going to say Rob Zombie, comma, Zombie Bob, comma, Zom, comma, Zombitey. Right? So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 zombies there. Okay, so at any time I could cycle through this array and I can pull through any one of those names that I want. Okay? So again, when you're doing a lot of things, arrays make it easier and you can just cycle through those names in that array. So let's look at something else. All right, so we've got variables are just names, and there can be different types of variables. We have true-false booleans. We have numbers without decimals that are integers. We have numbers with decimals that are floats. And we have words, which are strings. Then we have arrays, which are, a whole bunch of those put together. Now we can do something else with them. We can make them public. There's two ways to make it public, right? One way is you could do something like public integer. We're going to call it the number of zombies in the level, which is currently set to 0. So this public number, or this public word, when you put that in front of a variable, it means two things. First of all, it means that you can use it in other pieces of code. Okay? Right now, this is one variable examples.c# file in a class called variable examples. This is just one piece of code, one script file that is in my game. So the fact that this is public means other script files can reference this variable as well and modify it. Okay. Another way, for example, here in public, we have an audio source that we've called sound to play. Another thing that public does is it adds editor slots. So let's take a look. Let's drag this down. We are inside the Pro version of Unity. This does the same thing for the free version as well. But once you drop your code, if I take my code and drag it up to my main camera, it will add the script here in the inspector. So if I open that up, if you remember, by making it public, it takes that variable that I created and it opens up a slot here. So if I had some type of audio, I could grab it and drag it in. At the same time, that public variable, it puts the name there, and then I can change this as well. I can click and drag and change it. It will stay here if I save my file, but it's not going to update it in the code. Okay, the code would stay at 0 there. But since it's public, not only does it create an editor slot for you to drop stuff in and modify, it also lets other scripts use it as well. If you don't want it on the editor and you don't want any other script to use it, you can just set it to private. Okay, and they're all private naturally, so you don't have to write private. But if you want to make sure 110% positive that it's private, you could write that in front of it. So again, when you're looking at someone else's code, you're going to see these no matter what you're looking for. Booleans, integers, floats, strings, arrays, public, and private. Okay? Now, let's look at some other things that you're going to see inside someone's code. For example, here we've got an integer, and we have the total zombies in the level is set to 10. Okay? So that's the total number of zombies that this person wants in the level. So when the level starts, we're going to do all this code. Okay? Now keep in mind, you cannot do if statements, for loops, switch statements, or anything like that before the level starts. So you have to make sure the level has started before you do any other type of code. Setting up variables can be done anytime you want, so that's why most people do it prior to starting the level. So again, let's take a look. Once the level started, we're going to check, we're going to do an if statement. An if statement just checks one thing one time. Okay? So let's say if the zombies in the level which we set to 0 up here, zombies in level 0, if zombies in level, or 0, is equal to the total zombies in the level, which is 10, right, then it's going to do something. So again, if 0 is equal to 10, we're going to put some text on screen which says all zombies have been spawned, right? But we know that 0 does not equal 10, so this code here is not going to happen because this if statement is false. Okay? So that checks it one time when the level starts. Let's get a little bit more advanced. Let's take this if statement and let's check it 10 times, right? To do that, that's called a loop. We're going to loop that if statement 10 times. To do that, we have to use for, F-O-R, instead of if, I-F. So for, we're going to set the zombies in level to 0, right? So for zombies in level are less than or equal to 10, which we know, right? Total zombies in level. Then we're going to do some code here, and then we're going to zombies in level plus plus. We're going to add 1 to it. So for zombies in level equals to 0, yes, it's true that it's less than 10, so let's print to the screen zombie spawned, look out, right? So then we're going to add 1 to it, so it's now 1. So 1 is still less than 10, so zombie spawned, look out. We're going to add 1 to it. 2 is less than 10, spawn. And we're going to go all the way through this to where it says, is 10 less than or equal to 10? Yes. So do this. Then it's going to go to 11. Is 11 less than or equal to 10? No. So this for loop now becomes false, or not correct, and it's going to stop. So 10 times we're going to basically do an if statement 10 times, right? So if this is less than or equal to that, do this, and then go up 1 and check it again, right? But instead of doing the if statement 10 times, you put it inside of a for loop. Now let's do something different. Let's do a switch statement. A switch statement is just a bunch of if statements again, okay? But instead of looping through it, you're just going to go to the if statement that is true and then go on from there. So for example, switch statement, right? You have to type switch, zombies in level, okay? We know that zombies in level is set to 0, okay? So if it's set to 5, do these things, okay? Inside of a switch statement, you cannot say if. You have to say case. It's just the way it is, right? But it's just an if statement. So switch zombies in level, we know this is equal to 0. So is it equal to 5? No. So skip all this. Is it equal to 10? No. So skip all of this. So if it's none of these, it's going to be the default. Okay? So if it's not 5 and it's not 10, it's going to be the default. So the default is just to say a zombie spawned. And then break. What break does is it sets this whole thing to finished. It sets the whole thing to false. It says, don't worry about this anymore. So if zombies in level was 5, it'd say, oh, wait a minute, there is 5. It is set to 5. So what do? We're going to say Rob Zombie has been spawned, and then stop this whole thing. If zombies in level was 10, it's going to say, oh, it is 10. Zombie Bob has been spawned, and then it's going to break. It's going to stop, okay? So again, these are the extreme basics, day 1 of coding C#. But these are things that you're going to see in almost any game that's been created. So you can dive into somebody's code and figure out what's going on inside their level. They're going to have some things that are true-false, booleans, some things that are whole numbers, integers, some things that are decimal numbers, floats, things that are words, strings, things that are arrays or lists, right? There's a lot of those inside of it. Things that are public that you can reference in other code and other spots in the editor. Things that are private that are only pertaining to that object or that code. You're going to have an if statement that says if this is true, do something. You're going to have for loops that are basically doing if statements over and over and over again until it gets to a certain number. And then you're going to have a switch statement that is just a bunch of if statements that only happen if it's the correct thing. Okay? So these are all very basic, and you can look through all the code and find these types of things. So enjoy breaking down somebody else's code and figuring out what's going on inside their level.